Hello and welcome to Abandoned Projects. I'm Joe. Last time we read all the way through to past page 20 to the beginning of page 21. So here we go. Now, last time we left off just as Jor-El and Zod were kind of quarreling a little. Zod glowered at him, no longer amused, and no longer as pleased to see him, evidently displeased with Jor-El's lack of faith in him and his disbelief in the necessity of destroying Gordanian and Thanagarian civilian colonies in Thanagarian and Gordanian space. It was a sort of action that pushed them further towards conflict with Krypton, and yet it had worked for a time, until Tamaran had involved itself, decimated a chunk of the Gordanian forces before they had wiped out a Kryptonian colony, with the planet later settled by the Thanagar Empire and used as a forward command base against Krypton. By then, Krypton had hoped to retire into herself, to become even more reclusive, but could not do so, as Zod had committed them to an all-out war with three galactic empires, something which too many Kryptonians did not want, on top of later angering the commercially oriented Sudarians and alienating a good deal with them, a good deal of them, though the ruling council had hardly helped with this last debacle. You disapprove of protecting your own people? Ursa asked through gritted teeth, as many of those around Jor-El stared him down with unfeigned hostility. No, never. And going to war to protect one's rights as a people is something of such nobility that I could only have praise for. Jor-El retorted evenly, returning the glowers sent his way with a cold stare towards each person gathered there, before settling his gaze once more upon Zod. But I would rather not destroy a planet full of civilians who have nothing to do with war, only to proceed to anger two other empires and thus make two more enemies rather than allies against the first enemy. They wished for too much, Zod exploded at last, furious and impatient at having been questioned in such a manner. What of our sovereignty? What of it? We don't have the military capacity to fight them off, but we could have joined the Xudar Commercial Alliance and gotten the protection of the Green Lanterns, which would have left all of our colonies protected and the three empires unable to invade our systems. Our system, I mean. Jor-El retorted, having given this particular issue a great deal of thought alongside all of his friends in the mercantile caste. The thing was, military action would have likely had to have been undertaken, but by pushing back enemy military forces without attacking civilians would have given them the moral high ground. Then, if they had followed this alliance up with a Green Lantern and Xudar deal, they would have been feathered and protected from any and all retaliations from their enemies. Yes, but what of our enforced trade and lack of independent say-so in our own government, and the denial to expand and colonize those worlds which are rightfully ours? Zod retorted cleverly, using arguments that the ruling council was fond of, and that he also liked. Trouble was that Jor-El was familiar with those who had left the planet, and with those involved with the Xudar trading ring. Thus, he knew that Krypton would maintain its independence. It was just that they would be protected from invasion and conquest by the Green Lantern Corps. As to the matter of colonization, Jor-El knew euphemisms when he heard them. And as a fairly peaceful man, he disliked the reality. He didn't mind colonization of worlds and planets that were yet to be inhabited, or to colonize alongside other races, but to systematically wipe everything out on the surface of a planet before settling it, as the ruling council and Zod had done, was inherently wrong to his mind. It was a stance that his friends in the mercantile and artisan castes had been horrified at, but had, as always, been largely ignored as they thrived on peaceful commerce, as well as trading in some cases weapons to one empire or another. But to alienate them all and start a four-way war was something that frightened them. Zod, I'm not going to argue the point with you. Tell me what you want so that I could concentrate on my research, help save our people, and then we could bicker about politics and war. Jor-El said, exasperated and and weary as he met Zod's gaze levelly. Despite a bit of the dislike there was a light of respect that lit up in the general's eyes as he studied Jor-El for a few seconds. It was grudging, but it was there nonetheless. With a small cough and a false smile, he nodded. Very well. I had heard from Non that you didn't mince your words, but you must excuse my surprise at how much you do not. Non? Jor-El thought, startled. He had a friend named Non on the ruling council, who was likewise a scientist like him, as well as a surgeon. Non was a genius, the likes of which Jor-El had long aspired to, with the head of the House of El having shared a 20-year-long friendship with the man. If such was the case, perhaps he should trust Zod. Non was the one who had encouraged him, after all, 5 years ago, to start investigating the shifts and tremors taking place below Krypton's crust. The man was intelligent, gentle, and popular amongst most of Krypton's people, and was the youngest member of the ruling council in history, with Lorvan supporting him politically more for his popularity and because Non's best friend was married to the old man's daughter. Much as he trusted Non, the man had a tendency to be gullible and believe in the best in people, and he suspected, given his instinctive mistrust of Zod, that his friend had been taken in. You've spoken with Non? Indeed. It was he who informed me of the danger that may have befallen Krypton, and he promised me a copy of that report in return. I will support him and yourself when the time comes to convince the ruling council to change their minds. Zod informed him breezily. Then why pull me aside? The clean-shaven man asked archly. Because I wanted to meet you. After all I heard about you, you could hardly blame my curiosity. Zod told him with a shrug of his large, muscled shoulders as he smirked once again. It was an arrogant comment, but it was just the sort of remark one would expect from the bearded general, as the brother of Zor-El had discovered, and it frustrated him to no end. He detested having to bow and scrape and being treated akin to a circus animal for the amusement of this ambitious, warmongering politician, who knew about as much about science as he cared for those who made Krypton what it was. Without a bow or any sort of acknowledgement, Jor-El turned to leave abruptly, and as brusquely as he possibly could, little interested in exchanging any further civilities with the other man. He could see the man's charming points. He was suave, charismatic, and intelligent, but he was also a bore, a self-centered wastrel, and gluttonous beyond compare. The moment he had left the room, escorted out by Mala, who made a point of lambasting him and criticizing him for his rudeness, Zod scowled and turned to Ursa, only to nod towards the screen, whilst barking out at her, "Get me Brainiac!" And as though summoned by thought alone, the screen flickered to life before Ursa could make a move to contact him, with the cold, robotic voice of the supreme technological entity of Krypton echoing throughout the room. Yes, General Zod. You told me he was brilliant, and was he not? Yes, but stubborn as a farm animal and thrice as self-righteous as Allura told me, Zod complained, pouting in a manner more akin to a child, a notion that occurred to the dispassionate entity staring him down with its triple circular emblem. Indeed, however, it is he who discovered the anomaly below Krypton's surface, and it is through him that Krypton will be saved, General. Brainiac argued persistently, aware that he would eventually win out in this argument. And if I refuse to work with him, why not have you work on the solution? Zod snapped impatiently. If such is the case, I shall need more resources for the project, Brainiac replied, only to add smoothly. And if you do not plan to utilize Jor-El for his scientific brilliance, use him for his political connections and popularity. Zod fulminated quietly. He had no reply for Brainiac's words, as he knew them to be true, yet had no liking for Jor-El's lack of respect or toleration for his methods or goal. The objective was to raise Krypton and her sons and daughters higher than they had ever been before, to reach out to the stars and conquer all within sight, all that they wished. But what made things worse was the fact that Brainiac had asked for more resources. It was bad enough he already had access to particular mines, to Zod's private fortune, and one of his private estates on Argos, in order to build a battle station. And now he needed more? What was he hoping to build? A planet or something? Zod could not understand how Brainiac was burning for wealth so swiftly. Very well, but if he proves too short-sighted to accept my vision, he dies the moment I have power. And you will have your resources if you will explain to me what you are doing with it. Zod insisted ferociously, dreaming of the day that Jor-El would beg for his forgiveness, heck, even admit that he was right. But that would not prove enough, because Zod remembered all and forgave nothing. A wise policy, General. Now, I shall take my own leave, as the Council is currently contacting me. Brainiac answered, having given no indication of what he was using the private resources for, which served to further infuriate Zod. He had assumed that as it was in order, the AI would immediately hurry to cater to his needs, and yet all it had done was dismiss itself in order to hurry over to the Council. Admittedly, they didn't want it getting suspicious of their plans, for if the ruling council became aware that Brainiac intended to betray them, they'd likely shut it down. All that left Zod with was the waiting, as he awaited his troops who were on the fringes of Kryptonian space and were needed back on Krypton. He would need all the troops he could get for the takeover of the century, the revolution that would enable him to save Krypton, to build to its glory, to etch in stone Zod's noble name, to build statues to him, monuments to his generosity, to carve out an empire in both Krypton and his own name. And it was the least that Krypton could do for him, given what he intended to do for it. While Zod waited and schemed, Jor-El hurried to the main building where the ruling council's administrative departments were, hoping to meet with Non. Unfortunately for him, Non was preoccupied with a farming crisis on Argos, and didn't return until the next day, with Jor-El alerted that he might be back the next day or the one afterwards. Stopping by the next day was irritating, yet necessary if he wanted to speak with his long-time friend and supporter, in order to run everything by him, as well as ascertain if there was any truth to Zod's words. In the meantime, he undertook the reorganization of his notes, putting everything in their proper place, examining his thesis, and adding the newly acquired data together over the course of 8 hours in the evening, then another 5 the next day, whilst waiting for Non's return, and to hear from him at the ruling council building. Relieved that he no longer needed to wait in a waiting room, Jor-El was in Non's office before his name could be called out by one of Brainiac's drones, the one in charge of all bureaucracy and secretarial work. Once inside, he saw Non's face crack open in a warm and relieved grin. The man clearly under the impression that this was, at least like every other visit, a personal one on some level. They had grown up together. They had fought and bled together as scientists. And though they had taken different roads in life, nothing had changed between them. Non was still everything Jor-El could ask for in a brother. Outside Jor-El, he still would not trade him for anything in the universe. And it was the same in turn. A tall, 7-foot-tall bear of a man, Non was all but bald on his head, with a considerable collection of dark stubble that only added to the looks that had made him immensely popular with more than a few women on Krypton and Argus. Between that and dark blue eyes, gleaming white teeth, and a muscled physique, he had once made Jor-El feel insecure about himself, but that was long ago when he was an adolescent. Since then, Non had aged about as well as Jor-El, even though he lacked the latter's gray around the temple and gray facial hairs when there was stubble on his jawline. Non had recently married, but one wouldn't think to look at how undiminished his popularity and ongoing proposals from some female Kryptonians. His childlike enthusiasm whenever he saw certain people was always a sight to behold, and something that had made him more than 1 or 2 fast friends. Jor-El! Jor, how have you been? I apologize for my absence. I had some minor issue to see to regarding farm equipment on Argos. Brainiac told me you had returned to the capital. Non all but gushed as he wrapped Jor-El in a crushing hug that could have crushed any other man's ribs, proof of how much time Non spent exercising. Yes, but did he also tell you that I had a run-in with Zod? Jor-El asked acidly, a hint of displeasure in his voice, as he scanned his friend's face worriedly. Seeing it fall, he felt a niggle of doubt start to creep into him. Up until this moment, he had remained convinced that what Zod had told him about Non was all false. Yet now, he told me that he was planning some sort of coup, some sort of scheme. I do not trust the man, which is why I could not believe him when he assured me that you would be involved. Jor, tell me it isn't true. Please, Non, swear it to me in Rao and your deceased mother's names. I can't, Non told him sadly, as he looked away and released him from the great hug. Turning away a little, he added, This isn't where I would like to discuss it. And why not? What if we were discovered? Non, I want the truth. What is he up to, and why? Jor-El said to his best friend, his feet planted into the ground, as though to say, there he would remain and never budge for a single second, if it meant discovering the truth behind Zod's schemes. Non met his gaze and held it for but several minutes before he eventually folded. Too gentle, too honest a man to hold alive for very long, if it meant deceiving those he loved or held near and dear to his heart. Bowing his head a little, he sunk into his comfortable seat behind his desk and nodded into his chest with an air of defeat. Jor, can we perhaps reconvene after I finish here and leave to go check on Astra? Non pleaded earnestly as he referred to his wife, the younger twin sister of Allura. Jor-El hesitated, only to slowly nod in response. He had never known his friend to be clever, smart, and knowledgeable, yes, but clever? No. Furthermore, this would require a dishonest bone in his body, something that was quite impossible for Non, especially if it meant bringing up Astra in Z, the wife that Non had loved and treasured for the better part of 20 years before he had married her, and whom had proven herself a good friend to both him and Jor-El, a stubborn if gentle woman who would rather live on Argos taking care of plants and animals than living in the capital. She had captured Non's eye back when they were still novices, and not yet where they were today. It was she who had encouraged Non's political career, and encouraged him forward. While the couple were the image of the happily married couple, it didn't stop many a people from envying them or from disliking her for having snagged the noble Non, who would meet with Jor-El several hours later, with the scientist having passed his time with routine checks on several of the outlying provinces using Brainiac satellites. This had occurred considerable suspicion and confusion on his part, for the satellites revealed everything to be perfect, as beautiful as anywhere on Argos. But Jor-El had seen the northern regions and the western ones himself. They were jagged cliffs and lava pits, not idyllic little plains as they were 300 years ago. Why change the image? Jor-El had wondered to himself as he hurried to the lobby to wait for Non, stopping on the way only to discuss what he had seen in a manner, speaking with two others along the way, asking them if they had ever visited the aforementioned regions. What he heard chilled and dumbstruck him. Most of those who flitted about the capital and about the lobby responded with breezy amusement to his question. Oh, I've heard they are quite beautiful. Of course, I don't know anyone who has gone there, but Brainiac assures me that it is the most beautiful places on Krypton. How could the sons of Krypton be so dense, so trusting, and so detached from reality? Why had Brainiac chosen to show them such ridiculous pictures that were so obviously filtered? If it weren't for Non racing out of his office when he did, Jor-El would have likely contacted Brainiac in order to question him about this himself, in the hopes of getting an answer. Of course, such a thing would have likely tipped him off about how much he knew, and how much he suspected, and was starting to mistrust the AI, one that had manipulated satellite images in order to reveal nothing of the truth to the people of Krypton. Jor, let us be away to my home, Non said, taking him by the arm, in order to drag him away from the ruling building, into his hovercraft. They would travel in silence afterwards for about 10 minutes, the time it took to reach Non's home, with the larger man stating when Jor-El tried to ask him why all the secrecy. Not here. We'll discuss things over there. Upon arrival, Jor-El was greeted to the sight of the blonde Astra Inzi, the pretty and cheery wife of Non, who waved them over with a loud laugh and a warm joke, as was her way. Why, you brought a gift to me, Non. I must say, though, I prefer the last one you brought me, fruits from Argos. But I suppose I could put Jor-El in charge of the cleaning or something while you're away. I'm afraid I'm terrible at such tasks. Jor-El said with a light laugh as he shook his head at her. Non signaled him for him to follow. Whispering to his wife, he spoke shortly. Prepare the shelter room. Jor and I need to talk down there, Astra. I understand, Astra replied with a strained look on her face and a worried frown towards their surroundings, before she ushered them into the large palatial residence that vastly dwarfed the one Jor-El resided in. Welcome to our humble abode. Can I get anything for you, Jor-El? Drinks? Food? A brunette? Shooting her a shocked look, he shook his head as she snickered. It was her way. Where Lara thrived on propriety and her composure, Astra thrived on dirty jokes and keeping people off balance and laughing. She was the mere opposite of her twin sister, too, with the older of the twins bubbly and gentle and someone who favored middle ground while the younger was violent, extreme, and narcissistic. That'll be all. Away with you, Astra, Non answered, shaking his head at her, right before he leaned in to kiss her and wave her off with his own laugh, one that she shared before she hurried off to finish her lunch and get back to working, noticing Jor-El's bemused look and glances all over the building in search of something. They have her studying about peaches from Hagen province of Argos, and it is driving her crazy that she can't eat any. I see. And where are the children? On Kandor, visiting their family, particularly their grandfather, the large man retorted amiably before he led the way down to the elevator, which soon took them to the lowest floor in the house. Jor-El didn't comment, didn't ask whether it was maternal or paternal, as he already knew the answer, with it being the father of Astra and Allura. He supposed they were staying with Zor-El, but the thought was one that he didn't linger on for very long out of pride. If Zor-El wished to cling to Allura, that was his failing and his mistake, not Jor-El's. With that said, that didn't mean he felt Kara should be subjected to her, but that was neither here nor there. What was more important at that moment than Non's two children was the fact that they had something about politics to discuss. The further down they went, the more Jor-El felt nervous, and the more he remembered those old stories about the underworld being in the center of a planet from ancient times. It was hardly a comforting thought or notion, especially considering how volatile the center of Krypton currently was, due to all the damage it had sustained because of current-day Kryptonians and their technology. At the bottom of the basement, just as Jor-El began to feel the weight of the building and all the earth and dirt and tons of material above him start to press down upon him more than ever, a sense that began to fuse with discomfort in the cramped turbolift, a sense that he didn't much like, and that aggravated his anxiety and discomfort underground. I apologize. I forgot how afraid you are of confined spaces. Non apologized, noticing his discomfort and unhappiness. It isn't confined spaces I have trouble with, Jor-El muttered, his pride flaring up, only to deflate as the doors opened and he swallowed low. It's the underground part I hate. Oh, I understand, Non murmured, annoying him as he had spoken quietly, in the hopes that the larger man would not hear him. The bottom floor of the building was a marvel. It always had been, with it having once been a spacious environment with a few sofas and a shower in the far corner. With it having been something of a getaway place for Non and Astra, it had also been a place for Zor-El to enjoy once, from what Jor-El had once been told. Whereas when Zor-El had needed time and space to think about the rumors regarding his wife. With that said, though, Jor-El was unprepared for the large, spherical, almost Owen-styled, power battery-shaped chamber that now sat in the middle of the room. Non simply wandered in, with the scientist hesitating before he entered, only to fight off a surge of claustrophobic panic when it snapped shut behind him with a hiss. What is this? It'll shield us for a time from Brainiac's eavesdropping and nosiness. Non explained himself with a sigh as he sagged into a nearby chair that had been placed there in preparation for this sort of meeting, his friend supposed. There was a spare chair already placed near his to the side. Jor-El dragged it over so that it was placed opposite the seat of his friends, in the Spartan little cubicle/chamber, if it could even be called a chamber. Non nodded in acceptance of this movement to himself, licking his lips as he visibly prepared himself for an interrogation of a sort. I apologize for the secrecy, but I've grown cautious of Brainiac in recent months, his large friend murmured urgently, evidently afraid to say too much, yet aware that some things had to be said. Who? Right? Why? I understand he's a glutton and overly nosy, but he shouldn't be running amok. Do you think he schemes to destroy us or something? Jor-El wondered, confused and bewildered by all the secrecy, only to curse himself for his junkiness as he sat down. No, I don't think he schemes to destroy Krypton, but I do think something is off. You haven't been here in months. He has grown more pervasive, more involved in everything. And I do mean everything, Jor, down to the meals, what counselors should or should not eat, to their clothing, to their health, to everything. Of course, some such as Laura Vaughn and myself resist such reliance, but it is still disquieting and the tip of the iceberg, so to speak. Non clarified nervously as he swallowed a little, his revelation a horrifying notion to his friend. To rely on another so much and with no thought to maintain one's own independence was horrifying to Jor-El. It was akin to sinking into infancy once again and denying oneself one's own adulthood and responsibility. It is so much further than even I expected of some, or is it? Jor-El thought to himself, only to second guess his own initial assumption as he thought back to 6 months prior, when he had last been in the capital for an extended period of time, i.e., 3 days. Many were already counting on Brainiac to control transportation, communication, daily reminders of events on their calendars, and other important tasks. Now the council had simply carried that on to its most logical conclusion. Having grown up a fairly independent, self-made man, Jor-El could not fathom handing over all power over himself to someone or something else, especially someone he utterly detested, such as Brainiac. With the 40-year-old unable to imagine Zod giving so much control over to someone else too. Unable to resist asking his friend about Zod, he asked a question burning the roof of his mouth. What of Zod? I can't imagine he would hand over power over himself to someone or something else. Non grimaced in his discomfort at the mention of the general's name, evident, immediately noted by Kal-El's father. No, though Brainiac and Zod are in league together, but they are not in control of one another in such a manner, though Zod has opened up all his resources to the AI. Really? In league together? Jor-El remarked as he stroked his chin, thoughtfully studying his friend, who had sagged in defeat. He could discern quite a bit, as Non never could keep a lie. Never could lie to save his life? With the Kryptonian suspicious at the implication made by the man he had grown up alongside. Politics had changed him, he realized, and not all in the best of ways, especially if he had kept to himself the truth that Zod and Brainiac were in league together. What do you mean by that? Just that, Zod, please don't ask. I must. How can I answer Zod's offer of assistance if I don't know what the man has in mind? He approached you? Yes. It was now that Non seemed to fold into himself and seemed truly heartbroken. Utterly defeated, he at last confessed to the truth that had brought them there, with the man pleading with Jor-El. Jor, please, I beg of you, do not think badly of me. It has been difficult these past months, and the council has been rendered utterly useless. I had no other choice before me. Tell me what happened, then I shall see what I think, Jor-El replied stoically, having to resist the urge to move forward to place a hand on his oldest friend's shoulder, to instantly forgive him everything. But that would not do. Not when he didn't know the full story. Not when he didn't know what it was that Non had done or had not done. He didn't want to act as though he stood in judgment over his friend, and yet the longer Non prevaricated, the more he began to annoy him, and the more he felt that he was hiding something. What it was that Non was afraid he'd overreact to. He felt certain that it could not have been as bad or as horrible as what he made it out to be. And that's where I'm going to leave you, with Non keeping a secret, badly, and with Jor-El pressing him for the revelation. Now, I did have plans for Astra and Z and her children. Now, Astra will die. Now, I forgot what my plans for Astra were. have to read further into this part of this story, and then I'll probably remember. I also wrote it down elsewhere, but I'm not going to read my notes till then, so that it's a bit of a revelation to myself as well. Now, I'm pretty sure her kids, I plan to have them meet Non once he was kind of, well, brain damaged, and that his kids would basically act as friends to Connor Kent, and it would function as support characters for Superboy during the Planet of the Superman storyline, where once he's revived, of course, and they'd be amongst the first to accept him, and that would be Connor who would restore Non, and the story would revolve around Connor when it comes to the restoration of Non, and that Ursa would be redeemed by a combination of some of this and Superman's own storyline. So yeah, there was some big plans, but as for herself, her fate though is a tragic one. I do remember that much. So if you like this video, like, share, subscribe, and leave a comment.